Hey everyone, my name's Connor and I'm here to talk to you today about Target Test Prep and how instrumental it was for my success on the GMAT focus in this cycle. A bit about me, I'm 26 years old, graduated college in 2019. Since I graduated, I've been a software engineer and I'm pursuing an MBA just to get out of my hyper-technical role and transition into something with a little bit more of a strategic element. So I made this decision actually back in late July, kind of tentatively. I knew that it was something that I wanted to pursue, but I wanted to maintain realism, be realistic about the decision, whether or not the investment was worth it. So I really started from scratch. I don't think that I had seen this career path long term until very recently before I began preparing for the GMAT. So I started from scratch and I had a pretty low GPA in college, so I wasn't sure that an MBA was actually going to be doable for me. And if it were going to be achievable, I knew that I needed to have a really high GMAT score in order to make this a reality. So before I kind of set 100% myself on going for it, I took a focus mock cold just to see, if I was completely overwhelmed. Of course, there's a road to where you can be confident in your abilities on the GMAT and achieve a really high score, but I wanted to make sure that I at least had a solid basis. So when I took the mock in the beginning of August, I earned a 615. Of course, I was a little bit overwhelmed, but I thought that was a pretty solid basis, a good springboard and launch pad for the rest of the process. I felt like if I could only improve by a small quantity, I think that I would actually give me a shot at getting into a good MBA program. So that's what I did. After I got that score, the next thing literally that I did was make the decision to buy 4 months of access to TTP's study program for the GMAT focus. And every day, pretty much from when I took that mock to when I took the actual exam, I was putting in a considerable amount of time each day. I think every day I averaged during the week about 6 or 7 hours studying, and on the weekends I would take more of a break and only do an hour or two, and I was also working on the weekends. So that's how I spent the majority of my time. And of course, those numbers fluctuated due to just feeling burnt out, or maybe I was feeling under the weather, maybe something was going on. It was important that I listened to my mind and my body and take some breaks from time to time, but those are the average numbers, and TTP made it really easy, honestly. I'll get into a bit more of that later, but my final exam score, which I took about 3 months after I took the mock, was a 715 on the focus, which I'm really, really happy with. I wanted to break that 695 barrier. And like I said, since my GPA was relatively low, I wanted to dedicate myself to being set apart from the pack in the GMAT. It was really important to me that I balance those two out. Target Test Prep helped me to do that a lot. Breaking down my score overall, my total score as 715 to the 99th percentile. Again, really happy about that. Data insights, I scored an 84 out of 90. My quant was an 82, which was a little bit lower than I wanted to achieve, but I still am really, really happy with that. It's well above the average, and with my third category score, a 90 in the verbal overall, I think that's something I'm very content with, and I'm not sure that I would have been set up for success had I not subscribed to Target Test Prep. So let's get into a bit more of the prep. After my first mock, again, I knew that I was gonna have a long road ahead of me. The GMAT is not easy. The focus version especially, I think, is really, really hard. It's a long process that requires dedication. I thrive when there's a structure in my projects or in my study plans. If I was really diligent about breaking down where I was going to spend my time, or at least the chronology, the sequence of concepts that I would cover, working toward that final goal of having enough knowledge to be confident and prepared for the test, then that's a good environment for me. And that's one of the big reasons I settled on Target Test Prep. They give you a bevy of consumable subjects that you can work through either at your own pace, in whichever order you choose. The approach that I recommend is following the mission-based approach, where you get 30 plus missions of purely conceptual work, and there are checkpoints along the way. There are tests. You want to reach a certain target score based on your expectations for the test, and working through those sequentially I found was just so helpful. It was really organized well and consumable. You go through a great learning model. I think the people that work on TTP's material are truly masters. They've spent a lot of time trying to figure out what the best way to learn all of this content is, and what content specifically should be learned in what order. Most chapters follow a template of a concept being introduced, examples being given, and then practice problems being presented to the user. And that is kind of repeated through each chapter, but I found that those checkpoints where they give you those practice problems, very, very helpful for checking on your comfort level and your actual knowledge. Not only are you learning the concepts, though, you're also learning how to take the test. It is enforced very, very frequently as you work through the program that you're not just learning how to read for comprehension, you're learning how to strengthen an argument on, for example, something that would appear on an actual GMAT exam. You're not learning pure math. You're not just looking at how exponents and roots and ratios and all of those concepts are performed. You are learning how to take in a question on a GMAT, dig into your mind, come up with the necessary conceptual knowledge to answer the question, and then put pen to paper. That's something that's reinforced the whole way. The chapters are consumable. You see your progress not only through the entire program, but through each lesson. It shows how far you are. It makes it really easy for a person like myself who seeks that progress-based structure in that approach. It really makes it easy to say, okay, for the next hour, I'm going to get through 25% of this chapter right now. Or I'm going to spend the next 30 minutes reviewing some of the must-knows from the previous chapter. You're always aware of how much is left to go and how much you have accomplished already. Another thing that's special about TTP is the solutions and the explanations for the problems. And I thought that the quality of solutions and explanations is only attainable on like quantitative questions. Obviously, one can assume it'd be easier to demonstrate clearly how a question is solved if it's like a math question. There are clear steps, math is math, and verbal can sometimes be up to interpretation. But the way that Target Test Prep instructs you on how to approach verbal questions and data insights questions as well, which can also have some wiggle room in approaches. They have an actual approach. They tell you how to look at things instead of just saying, read this and your conclusion should be that. They point you to specific places in the passage that you can pay attention to and say, oh, this is a really important sentence. This is the conclusion of the passage, or this is a piece of evidence used to support, or between these two sentences, an assumption was made. How do you get from point A to point B? After you go through this program, it's going to be instinctual for you. You're going to see not in front of your eyes, but it's going to be just a natural process in your brain as you work through these questions. And on that specific front, the solutions and explanations are going to have you walking into that test room feeling really confident. Another thing on that note is that the mental game and the strategy lessons that are imparted through the program are a game changer. I'm prone to getting nervous before tests. I can prepare all I want, feel as confident as I want with the material, but in the past, I think my scores have suffered on college exams, standardized tests, quizzes from nerves. But TTP supplies you with a lot of different strategies to kind of control those events, and make sure that you're in the right frame of mind when you walk into the exam room or when you take it at home, since that's also a possibility. There were times on the exam itself where I felt myself drifting a little bit back into maybe a less confident headspace or beginning to think too much about the exam itself, and it's a known fact that those are detractors from your overall score. So having the mental fortitude that you develop, you really do develop it during TTP, you can train yourself to get good at the test itself instead of just the questions that are being asked. My advice for anybody that's working through GMAT preparation in general, but this is more specifically geared toward people taking TTP, which again, I highly recommend. Can't recommend it enough. It requires dedication. I mean, it's a long program. You're getting your money's worth. You get a lot of questions to answer. I mean, I'm sure they have the real figures, but my estimate would be thousands, like several thousand questions in total at a bare minimum. It takes a lot of time to solve them. I mean, on the exam itself, you get over 2 minutes to solve each one. So you have a lot of time to spend practicing these problems, reading through the lesson plans, the conceptual material, the strategy guides. You got to remain dedicated, and you got to give yourself a lot of time to go through it, because it is worth it. It's all important, really. Of course, there's some emphasis on things you may not be so comfortable with as opposed to things that you are, but give yourself time, remain dedicated, and work through the program. Another thing on that note, though, is to listen to yourself, listen to your body, your head, your mind. Make sure that you're not overwhelming yourself. If you give yourself enough time, you shouldn't be overwhelmed. But inevitably, you might experience some of those thoughts of self-doubt, of being overwhelmed with the sheer amount of content. If that does happen, and it probably will, it's not the end of the world, take breaks. Make sure you're treating yourself well, you're treating your body and your mind well, and it'll help with your longevity, which is definitely required. It's a scary thing, but it's definitely worth it. Second piece of advice, which is very TTP related, you got to follow the program. Almost take their word for every single letter and follow it down to that letter. If they tell you to make a flashcard for every must know, I recommend you do it. If they tell you it's time to review some concepts, you should probably go back and do it. They've put so much labor into developing this product so that it is perfectly tuned to reinforce all of the concepts introduced. You should listen to everything they say and try and follow the program as best as you possibly can. Make sure that you leave enough time to do so as well. Finally, this is a bit of personal advice. What helped me get through that long process and get through TTP, it was fun going through the material, but after a certain amount of time, it's easy to lose sight of the light at the end of the tunnel. But go through the program and visualize the success. Take it from me. What you do, the hard work that you put in going through Target Test Prep's GMAT course is going to be worth it. It increased my mock score by 100 points to my final exam score. It is worth it. So with that confidence, I would suggest visualizing the end goal, right? The end goal is, of course, your applications notwithstanding, getting a great score, meeting your target score on the GMAT. We want to be realistic, obviously, which is something that any TTP tutor will tell you, but have that confidence, visualize the emotions that you're going to experience when you walk out of that test exam center with the score that you want. The happiness, the achievement, the sense of wonder. I conquered this. It is a hard thing. It is an achievement to even take the GMAT. But I walked out of there with a great score. Those positive emotions, take some time to think about them once in a while you're going through this prep. You have all of the resources necessary to do well. I think I would be willing to venture a guess, if you're even considering Target Test Prep, you have the mental facilities to do well. Everything is in front of you. It's all about putting the work in, and making sure that you remain motivated to continue the work, see it through all the way to the end. That was really big for me, and the emotions that you imagine, I could say firsthand that they equal or surpass what you can imagine. So in summary, I highly recommend TTP. It's the only prep that I used, and I got a pretty good score. Something that I was really happy with, and I even met and exceeded my expectations for my GMAT focus score. I was more prepared for this test than I think any other test that I've ever taken, and that was due to the work, the time that's spent consuming the material that TTP gives you access to. Finally, if you put in the work, good things are going to happen. Hardworking people get lucky more often than not, I think, and TTP allows you to do that. Anyway, thank you for listening to me. Pull the trigger on TTP. Trust me. Appreciate your time, and good luck. You're going to do great.